Yeah,
great.
Good.
So it seems like every day now, to copy Janos, that we're seeing an AI plan being exposed from country to country. But you, back in the day, not back in the day, 2 years ago, shall we say?
Such a long time
ago, put the UK's strategy forward. And I'm looking. I reread it this afternoon because I'm a bit of a geek, and I was looking at sort of the diversity question, access to data, talent. Now that seems to be sort of been taken on by many other governments, both here in Europe and elsewhere, as a sort of a go-to. Now, looking 2 years down the line, and what both the UK, those in Europe and elsewhere have done, what has changed in the last 2 years for you?
Well, in the UK, there's been a lot of money put in, and despite everything else that's happening, we now have an office for AI. Tabitha Goldstop, who's on the panel after me, is the chair of the AI Council. I'm the UK AI Skills Champion. Demis Hassibas from DeepMind is an advisor. There will be a council announced shortly. And so we have action. And in fact, very recently, like 3 weeks ago, we announced a big, the government announced a big skills package. Governments are very good at repurposing money. They're talking about money once, twice, 3 times. So this money's been talked about at least twice before. But basically, there was a program that launched 1,000 new PhDs and industrially funded masters and the Turing Institute AI fellowships. And that's just on the skills side. The big thing as well is that we put the first recommendation in our report was about data trust, because what industry told us was that they couldn't, small companies had a real problem getting the data they needed to test their algorithms, and data exchange and data trust was something we put right at the top of the report. We put it before skills, even though some of the civil servants wanted us to put skills first. We put data trust first because we thought that was so important, and that idea has gained traction, at least in the UK. I don't know about elsewhere, and we hope to see international, and by that I mean national to national. And so we're talking about transnational data trust as well as data trust set up within the UK. And I think that's something we could do in Europe. So the big thing for me is that I've seen things happening. The other thing is there's too much ethics.
Too much ethics.
There's too much talk about ethics we need to get on and build. There's a global shortage of AI professors. Okay? If you want skills, you've got to have people who teach those skills. And I say professor by meaning actually teachers up to the fullest, the highest rank of research professors. There is a global shortage of AI professors. And so actually it's easier to set up an AI and ethics department than it is a new AI research group, or to set up a new degree in teaching machine learning, because who's going to do it? And that's the biggest problem. So we have to have a skills pipeline, and that pipeline's got to be diverse.
But that's not just a question for Europe, though. I mean, everywhere you go, if I'm a PhD student in this area,
yes,
I'm getting offers from
That's not just a question. I said a global shortage.
So how do you solve that?
Possibly in China, where actually they've probably got they're producing. They would still say they've got a shortage, because actually the Chinese lose their top talent to industry just like we do, but there's just more of them coming up behind. And it is, so I think we really should be focusing on the skills piece, huge amount. The ethics is very, very important, but there's a lot of talk about ethics now, and it's all hypothetical. And we've got to, at the same time as talking about how we build AI in an ethical way, how we build AI responsibly so it's not going to do anybody any harm, we've got to learn to build systems. And I was struck by the minister talking about trust and how we get the public to trust what we do. And partly that's building systems that they learn to trust. But, relatively simple ones to start off with. Talking about AI and ethics in a vacuum without actually building AI systems, there's just so much. I mean, in the UK, we've got the Centre for Data Ethics Innovation that was set up by the government to help it is independent of the government, and will advise the government on regulation in this space, because it's too early to know really what to regulate and how to regulate it. But we know regulation's got to come. But there's just so many centres of AI ethics just in the UK, right? And it's like, what are they all going to do? So I would put an emphasis on skills, and yes, yes, we need the ethics, but it can't all be about ethics.
So I know across Europe the ethical questions come up quite a lot, and the idea that maybe Europe can succeed by putting that ethics first, where maybe it can't compete on the money
I think
front.
that is the route to losing. If you want my honest opinion, it's the route to losing. People from industry will agree with that. I think we have to be out there, we have to be building AI, we have to have new companies that are getting out there building AI systems. We've got to get AI adopted in our existing industries and in our public sector as well, by government, and we won't do that by just talking about, we can't do anything until we've sorted out the ethics problems, because actually we don't know what some of those are until we meet them. That doesn't mean I'm blind to it, at all. Please don't take this as I'm an anti-ethics in AI person. It's just that we need to be building systems. If we're only known for our ethics, are the Chinese really going to worry about what we're doing on ethics? If they're going to be developing systems we're going to have to buy, right? So we need to talk to them about it, because we've got to work out what we're prepared to buy and what we're not, for sure. But they are going to be building systems that we are going to want to buy.
We were talking about this before we came on stage, about that Chinese-European or Chinese-Western division. How do you balance it out where there's obviously some ethical differences between both systems, but also you need to have some sort of relationship with them?
It's not just ethical differences, it's complete cultural differences.
I was trying to be polite, but yes.
Yes, I mean, it's complete cultural differences. China's not a democracy, never has been, and probably never will be. The only way you can overthrow the government in China is by revolution, and that comes along once every how many hundreds of years. So the Chinese government's main reason for wanting to look at all the data is to stop any talk about revolution. Okay? We're trying to maintain democracy. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect privacy. But the Chinese will argue that they're looking after their citizens on the internet. Right. In our paper, The Four Internets, we initially talked about the authoritarian or surveillance governance of internet and data in China. But actually, they would probably argue it's more paternalistic, because they catch the bad guys. They stop the bad things happening. The price they pay for that is freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and things we probably would not be prepared to give up. And this is where the debate, it's a moral debate actually, more than ethical in a way. I think the Chinese want ethical AI the same as we do. They don't want their AI systems to kill people. They have the same issues about putting AI into weapons that we do. Doesn't mean they aren't going to try and be the leaders in this space, but they have the same issues about it. They want to know, they have the same issues, they have the same problems with aging and medicine, the problems of health and wanting to cure cancers and find a cure for Alzheimer's and stop people getting diabetes. And it's a huge problem in China. So they're throwing lots of effort into that. And they do have ethical values for that, as far as I understand. I'm not an absolute expert. I go to China. I'm going to China next week, actually. The project I'm working on with the university in Guangdong is AI and traditional Chinese medicine. It's fabulous. Nobody knows how traditional Chinese medicine works. But I can attest it does, because I'm having acupuncture on my Achilles tendon at the moment. It's fabulous. That's my project for next week. There's scrutiny about medical records, just like we have.
So let me put my European hat on here and play the devil's advocate. As much as I appreciate that maybe you need to start building...
I'm sort of playing the devil's advocate the other way.
Well, there we go. We can meet in the middle.
Yes.
As much as I understand you might have to build systems and you have to get the ball rolling before you start creating ethical structures, etc., is it not valid to say that if the Europeans put their own ethical stamp on it, and the 500 million consumers, well-heeled, wealthy consumers, that provides them with a seat at the table, that's worth pushing that, because at some point you need to make those ethical decisions?
I think we absolutely could be leaders in this space. Whether we think we can be leaders compared to the US is another question. But because we have the same sort of moral values as the US, with democracies, and we believe mostly in freedom of speech and protection of privacy and so on. But if we only do that, it won't work. We absolutely have to be able to build AI systems. And not just build them, but we have to, the key thing is having the skills base in Europe to help us get AI, help our industry, our car manufacturers, our banks, our pharmaceutical companies use AI, help our governments and both national and local use AI to become more effective. And if we don't have the skills base to do that locally, just locally, then we have to import all that. And where are we going to import it from?
Well, that's we only have a couple minutes left. Skipping from ethics to Brexit, I have to ask, purely because of what's happened the last couple of weeks, where does...
the Brits, have you just seen what's happened tonight?
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Sorry. Sorry. What has happened tonight I find unbelievably shocking from a UK constitutional point of view, but go on.
And if you haven't read it, please go to Politico. We have good coverage on that. How does Brexit affect this? When you look at access to talent, money, fitting into the broader global context, where does a UK AI strategy fit post-Brexit?
You can see it, as ever with Brexit, you can see it from both sides of the coin. You can say, oh my God, we've lost all the skills and talent because we won't get them so easily from Europe. But there's a whole world out there with potential talent for AI. I would look to India, I'd look to Southeast Asia, I mean, even to China at the moment, to engineers from China, but particularly to places like India. There's a huge growth in AI in India.
But is that growth enough to maybe counterbalance the Europeans who might have come to...
Well, how many people are there in India?
That's true.
Compared to Europe, there's 1.3 billion people in India, and they produce far more engineers than we do in Europe. So I'm not saying they necessarily have the right programs. Well, I think they do. I mean, we have lots of applications for Indian PhD people to do PhDs, and we can't take them at the moment because of the visa issues. So after Brexit, the visa issues will change. If we leave, they'll change. If we don't leave, they won't change. So that's all up in the air. But I don't see a problem in terms of there is a huge skills base out there, and it'll come from somewhere.
With the final minute that we have left...
Yeah, I've got to go home tonight, by the way. I'm actually catching a Eurostar to go home. I can't believe it, but I am.
Well, hopefully there are no strikes in France to slow you down.
France last week was dreadful. I hope it's not like that. It was 3 hours to get on the Eurostar at Gare du Nord last week.
So the final question is, just as we start this summit and we start the discussions, what is the one sort of area that keeps you up at night when it comes to AI? What are you focusing your time on?
Diversity. The problem with... yes, come on, round of applause for diversity. The problem with AI is that the talent pool at the moment is very narrow. And all around the world, generally, you see it. And basically, AI is going to impact the whole of society. And if it's only developed, designed, applied by a subset of society, then the AI won't be fit for purpose. And so in my career, I have pulled back from doing women in science stuff. I have sometimes done it and sometimes not, because I don't want to be known as the woman that talks about women in science. I want to be known as a scientist that happens to be a woman. But in my career, I wrote my first paper on women in AI in 1988. I wrote my first paper on the lack of women in computing in 1987. So I have been passionate about this for a long time, and I don't see a shift in the dial. And I'm sort of giving it a last fling, and we're going to put our foot on the accelerator in the UK next year. Tabitha and I were doing the plan on the train today to launch a new campaign. A new campaign. I call it a campaign because it is. It's a war footing, actually, to get more diversity into AI. And it doesn't mean everyone has to become machine learning programmers. We want diversity amongst machine learning programmers, but there are lots of people who are going to be designing algorithms, curating data, doing all sorts of things, and we need a whole range of people. We need the humanities students, we need historians, we need philosophers, we need language students, we need social scientists, we need psychologists, we need philosophers, right, in this space. And so the programs you'll see coming out next year in the UK very rapidly on the back of the ones we've just launched, which were sort of quick fixes to get more skills out there. The programs this year and leading into next year will be about getting a more diverse, trained workforce in AI.
Wonderful. I'm very conscious of the time and getting you to the
Thank
Eurostar.
you.
So, Dame Wendy, thank you so much for
Thank you for inviting me.
Great. And I think with that, we're going to serve the first course. So, bon
Oh,
appetit.
right. I'm going to go and eat on the train. Oh.